Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You're in the right place. I know we had to move you out of the one hall into this one. I appreciate you still finding us today. Star Wars toys, did they really make that? So this is a little presentation my partner and I here put together.
So I'm Ryan Beise. I've been a long time Star Wars collector. I have about 13,000 action figures in all. I've been host a couple podcasts with Galaxy Toys, collecting Cosmos. I'm one of the original Ewok builders and actually a longtime member of Sarlacc, well over 20 years now. And this is Jake Stevens.
Hi, yeah. So we're pretty involved in different facets of the Star Wars collecting community, especially here in the Seattle area. Like Ryan said, we're both members of Sarlacc, which is a Seattle collecting group here. We're both on the Galaxy Toys podcast you can find on iTunes and other places you grab podcasts. I have a website from forlamdezuckus.com that's only about Star Wars action figures. And finally, with my buddy Chris B here in the audience, we have a Toy Run podcast, which is a weekly podcast about Star Wars action figures. Who knew you could talk about Star Wars action figures every week, but somehow we've done it. So we're going to share some of this ridiculous amount of knowledge we've amassed. As Ryan will attest, we are both lifelong collectors. Okay, it started a long time ago in a Christmas not far away. So
I still have that Ewok builder.
And I have that very same AT-AT here, you can see. So yeah, we've never stopped. That's why we're those guys. So what we've done is obviously Star Wars toys. It's the 40th anniversary of Star Wars this year. Star Wars action figures are 39. They'll be turning 40 because they didn't make them in time for the movie to come out because we didn't know Star Wars was going to be the success. But over the almost 40-year history of Star Wars action figures, they have obviously had to come up with lots of creative ways to keep selling us action figures. And so we're going to take you through not necessarily the history of Star Wars. We've done that at past Comic-Cons here, but this time we're going to point out some of the most craziest Star Wars action figures. And most of these, if you had Star Wars action figures as a kid, you'll probably recognize some of them, but then again, others, they're just weird. So 40 figures for almost 40 years of Star Wars figures. And we begin with C-3PO. Obviously, we all know C-3PO. There's tons of C-3PO action figures, but obviously Hasbro needs to combine that with something, and that would be Santa Claus. So, yes, of course. So in 2002, we had C-3PO Holiday Edition.
We all remember R5-D4 as the droid in Star Wars A New Hope. Of course, he had a bad motivator. And so obviously, you know, if you're going to make a figure of that, there's our original vintage R5-D4. But Hasbro decides in 1996, R5-D4 needs to, like, be more powerful or something. So let's give him guns on the side of his arms. You know, while we're at it, let's just have him split open and shoot a rocket out. Actually, this was a concept Hasbro had considered. There was rumors at the time, for those of us who were on the internet in 95 and 96, that they were going to make an attack R2-D2 and attack C-3PO. And this figure was so not well received that we're pretty sure those plans were scrapped for that very reason.
Now, I just do want to point out that you're going to see lots of images in here, and you're going to see this logo at the bottom, and it's a fantastic website for anyone who are into Star Wars action figures, and that would be JediBusiness.com. It's the largest Star Wars database on planet Earth, online, and so we definitely want to say a big thanks for that.
And Chris's face turned red.
Yes, and the owner of that site is in attendance. So, Star Tours. Anyone who's been to Disneyland, Disney World, any of the Disney parks around the world, you know that they have this ride. Well, this ride, of course, has people that staff this ride. These are cast members, okay? As a former cast member, I can't tell you how jealous I am. I used to work for Disney Cruise Lines, that these particular cast members got an action figure in 2007. So yes. So you could buy a Star Wars Star Tours officer in 2007.
Those who are really keen of eye there will notice this was actually a Hasbro Imperial officer that was repainted for the Star Tours outfit, but it was sold at Star Tours stores as a part of a multi-pack. So I talked about R5-D4 with weaponry. Well, anybody knows anyone about their expanded universe, there was this C3PX, and if I remember correctly, it actually came from the Droids cartoon. C3PX looks something like this. Now, it's not C3PO, but, you know, it's
so
like...
threatening.
Yeah, and who knew that a protocol droid could be so... Well, I guess if you're reading the current Marvel comics, we all know that there's another protocol droid who's pretty threatening. But they made an action figure of this. This was actually a Build-A-Droid from a Walmart exclusive, and you had to collect all the different parts from the different packs that you would buy in order to build this. But, you know, you always wanted to see 3PO with a gun coming out of his hip or something like that.
All right, well, this pretty much says it all right here. What do you do when you cross a bunch of Jedi Knights with the current owner of all Jedi Knights? Okay? Jedi Mickey was born, and not only did Mickey join the Jedi cause, but he also brought along his custom astromech droid R2MK. Yes, MK, Mickey. So, yes, Mickey Mouse is a Jedi Knight.
He actually got his own starfighter, too.
He did.
They took the Episode 3 starfighter and repainted it, and it came with Mickey Mouse. Had little mouse ears on it. And, well,
Hidden Mickeys. Hidden Mickeys.
Yeah. So, we'll go back to a little 1996 here. They put out a deluxe line of action figures. And, you know, we all like Han Solo. He's pretty awesome. And, you know, what could you do with him that might be weird? I mean, really, he's an all-around cool guy. So let's give him a smuggler backpack. Well, if you look at the basic figure, well, he's just got some straps on his chest. Well, that's kind of cool. Let's get him a giant backpack. The funniest thing about this, a lot of people, when this came out, there was like a riot control stormtrooper, there was Luke Skywalker with a big old desert skiff thing that would go on his back too. But the funny thing about this is it came out about the same time as Shadows of the Empire, and I was on the old rec.art Star Wars collecting news group, so that's what we had for the internet back then. And some people were going, so I don't get it. This is a Shadows of the Empire Han. Is this like the dream he's having while he's in Carbonite? That he's running around with this giant backpack? So I always remember that, but it's such an odd figure. You have to have the backpack actually has a little stand on the back to keep it standing up, because otherwise it will fall over.
All right, so what do we get when we cross a Rebel pilot with George Lucas? I saw someone's hand go like this. Oh. Yes, we get George Sakul, where if you look at his name, you can see it's George Lucas backwards. Yes, this was an actual convention exclusive. George, back when he owned Star Wars in 2002, made us all line up for hours on end at a Star Wars Celebration convention to collect himself. So, thank you, George.
This was not the last George Lucas action figure either. There was a mail-in later on with George Lucas as a stormtrooper.
Yes, but that one, he made himself young. He was dark-haired, dark-beard, so he probably didn't like this one.
So, Will Rowhood. Those of you who have been collecting a long time, you know this name. For a long time, there was petitions online that they need to make Ice Cream Maker guy. And, like, who's Ice Cream? I would see these petitions and go, is this like a challenge? Because here's Ice Cream Maker by if you didn't know it. Is this a challenge to find the most obscure person in Star Wars to make an action figure of it? People were petitioned for it. And all he is, he's on Bespin, he runs by carrying an ice cream maker. So hey, it worked. He comes with this ice cream maker, and Hasbro, in their wisdom at the time, put a little Rebel emblem on the bottom of the ice cream maker, because clearly the ice cream must be secret Rebel plans.
All right, who doesn't love our quirky little astromech droid? And who doesn't love reindeers? Yeah, well, if you're going to have Santa 3PO, you better need someone to tow him around. So, yes, R2-D2 Reindeer Edition was made in 2002.
So it's a part of the 2-pack with the 3PO we saw earlier. If you really want to look those up, there's a couple different holiday packs that are a little ridiculous.
Well, the funny thing is that these are not even creations of the toy company. These are based on the concept designer for the concept artist for Star Wars and the original trilogy movies was a guy named Ralph McQuarrie. And these were Christmas cards he would make for Lucasfilm. each year. And so this is actually where that inspiration comes from.
So I'm just going to put this name up there. How many people know who this is? Right now, how many people? There's a couple. Okay, great. Even if I showed you this picture, would you know where this person is in the movie? Yeah. This is the character that Luke sold his land speeder to on Tatooine. You barely see her. It's actually a her. So, you know, we need an action figure of that. You'd think it was a Jedi looking at that, but she's got a gun there, so.
All right, so we got Jabba the Hutt. We know what he's about. We know that Jabba's on the kinky side, as he has lots of dancers and people around him. But apparently Jabba really likes, how do we say this? We got mixed company here. Anyway, we have a six-boobed character here who Jabba has as one of his personal dancers. Yarna here. Fans asked for this figure for a long, long, long time. Even mostly because this was actually, there's concepts that they were going to make this back when Jedi came out in '83. So there's hard copies of this that was probably going to be released, but they probably said, why are we making this? This is a kid's toy line. But back in 2008, they said, finally, enough is enough. Let's go ahead and put this figure out. And I think this lone figure probably sat on the pegs longer than any other figure. We did a panel, in 2013 or 14? And we actually, prior to going to the panel that year, found this figure still swinging on the peg. So,
Just Coleman Toys R Us. They still have it, yeah. So, Darth Vader. He's big, he's awesome, he's all in black. But why not do white Darth Vader, right? Be a little different. If you ever read the Infinities comics, the Infinities are the concept of what would happen if we changed this thing in the Star Wars universe. In this case, it's where Darth Vader completely turns good at the end of Return of the Jedi, helps Luke defeat the Emperor, and comes back to the Rebel Alliance and says, hey, spray paint me white, right? So let's get a white Darth Vader action figure, because why not?
that makes him good. I mean, yeah, right?
They're totally going to forgive him for everything. But on the plus side, I would say, if you're ever interested, go back and read the Infinities comics. They're actually really fun. There's some cool stories in those. This is one of those things, this came in the comic packs, and when we get those, and I'd buy the comic pack, and I'd read the comic, like, this sounds awesome. I want to read this. And it made me read some of these comics because of it.
Yeah, those are Dark Horse comics from.
Yes.
Yep. All right. So we have our hero, our fabulous hero, Luke Skywalker, and we have Depends. So why not throw the two together, and so kids at home can reenact that exciting scene where Luke takes a bath after getting attacked by the Wampa, and we have back to tank Luke. And this actually came with the tank that you were meant to fill up with water. So, but when you're looking at it from an action figure point of view, yeah, this doesn't do a whole lot.
This is one of those figures I was like, they would never make this figure, right? Never, ever. No, he said it came with a back to tank. It came with a little tube that came out of the top of the back to tank, so you could blow bubbles into it and recreate bubbles with Luke in there.
So if you're in the bath and there's bubbles,
so anybody who was collecting in 1995 probably knows where I'm going with this. We see Luke, he's pretty scrawny. Let's be honest. He's kind of scrawny. And our original vintage figure was scrawny. It makes sense. But in the mid-90s, toy companies said our figures need to be very muscular. And I didn't really look at this. I've gone back and looked at old figures at the time. Like, if you go look at Jurassic Park figures, Sam Neill's figures got some pretty good muscles on it, too.
Antonio Banderas in the Zorro line.
Oh, the Shadow, too. Alec Baldwin was huge, yeah. So, let's do this to Luke. Yeah, the only thing, we were questioning this. This was the first 9 action figures that came out in 1995. And a lot of us collectors are like, why? Why did they do this? And if you go look at the whole line, they're all pretty big and muscular. I have one more from this set I'll show later. 3PO wasn't very muscular, thank goodness. Or R2D2. But the only thing I could figure is like, maybe this was off the Hildebrandt artwork or something, because he showed some muscle there. But I don't know. It was definitely one of those things. When the Millennium Falcon was released, then people thought maybe they should have just put a gym in the back of the Millennium Falcon.
Come on, I'm going to Dashi Station to pick up power converters.
Yeah.
All right, so we got the Cantina. It's a famous place, of course, in the original Star Wars film. Loads of characters. You all recognize this guy, right? You do? That might be playing tricks because this guy did not make it into the Cantina. They worked on his costume. He never got any screen time, but they sent these photos to Kenner, the toy company at the time, and said, hey, these are going to be some characters. You want to get to work on the figures now that the film's a smash hit.
Black and white photos of that.
Yes, black and white. So they go ahead and create what is now a very expensive action figure, and this is why. This is called Blue Snaggletooth. It was named Snaggletooth, but it's now in the industry referred to as Blue Snaggletooth. I saw one just on the show floor, just before here. It was graded. That means they've had a company go through and check on how pristine and beautiful it is. It had a $600 price tag on it. And this is 3 3/4 inch figure of, piece of plastic. $600 on the show floor today. Can be yours. I will not plug the vendor. Obviously this figure came out, and then I think Lucasfilm went, excuse me, that figure, even though it didn't make it in the film, appeared then in the holiday special. And if you've ever hated yourself enough to make you watch the Star Wars holiday special from 1978, just so you know, it has 45 minutes of Wookiees growling. Okay, so in case you've ever
talk about what Ichi was doing.
Yeah, no. In the holiday special, this guy here was featured, and that image here is actually from the holiday special because, like I said, he didn't get any screen time, and so they changed the figure to be more accurate after the holiday special, making the blue version the rare version. It was also a Sears exclusive, which, of course, made it a little more rare as well. So that is blue to red Snaggletooth. Odd choice.
So if you own this figure, you own a holiday special action figure.
Absolutely. The red one.
Yes. R1G4. Yeah, this is more of a prop, really. If you watch the movie, it's this giant droid thing that's sitting outside the Jawa sandcrawler. But hey, it doesn't move. It doesn't do anything. Let's do an action figure of it. Because, yeah, why not? I think it has little tiny arms that move. It really doesn't do anything. It looks great outside your sandcrawler, but yeah.
Yeah, for those who are Astromech fans, this is obviously the generation before R2s, and then R3s, and R4s, and R5s, and now as of Rogue One and Force Awakens, we're up to R9 and R0 they've even gone to. So we got plentiful, but this is the one that started it all, R1, and all his articulated glory.
Yes.
Something you throw at your brother and sister, maybe. All right, we got Ketwall here. Ketwall was a controversial addition to the Star Wars special editions that were released in 1997, where they went in and George tinkered around with this movie, upset everyone, killed some childhoods. And then what they did is they wanted to start making figures from this line. And so I think they took their inspiration from maybe a basketball game or maybe exotic dancers. I don't know, because they decided to make the Ketwall figure with removable pants that revealed that he's actually walking around on stilts. Yeah, I don't know.
He has tiny little feet.
He has tiny little feet,
Tiny little
and he is walking around on stilts. So, you can dress up maybe your other action figures in his pants.
Interesting thing, in the special edition, they actually took this mask and turned it around for another alien. So, if you really want,
Actually, you can see here on the left hand, your left hand side, the back of his head is actually the face of another special edition character, but that one looked like a Rastafarian lizard with a big hat on.
Rumslag. This sounds like something more from Pirates of the Caribbean or something. And in all honesty, he was an interesting character in that when you see him in The Phantom Menace, he looks like he's talking to himself. Because originally there were supposed to be two guys walking down there, but they decided to take one out. So, hey, he was barely in there. Let's give him an action figure, too. The interesting thing is you take off his lovely space helmet, it looks like Jason.
Or Casey Jones. All right, we're moving on. So in 1985, the last vintage toy line came out. It was canceled pretty quickly. It was based on cartoons in the 80s, Ewoks and Droids. Kenner was desperate to hold on to some of that Star Wars money and keep making stuff. So they created this whole expanded universe concept idea about who takes over after death, our Darth Vader and the Emperor destroyed. And they created this new villain called Atha Prime. And it has to do with Clone Warriors and things like that. So that was the concept. They pitched it to Lucasfilm and they went, yeah, no thanks. We'll be good with Star Wars figures for right now. So they said no. And so they couldn't produce anymore. And the line goes into what we call the dark times. Well, we're all familiar with the Emperor has these guards. They're called the Emperor's Royal Guards. They kind of follow him around everywhere he goes. Well, in 1998, they decided to kind of mash the two. And they took the concept of Atha Prime, but now made him a Imperial Guard. So this figure is very unique in the regards that this was supposed to come out, if Kenner had its way, back in 1986. But this was lost on the central cutting room floor. So we now have the Imperial Sentinel, and he, in the comic books, was the protector of a re-cloned Emperor. So Emperor Palpatine brings himself back alive, and these are his protectors. So
the Dark Empire comics, yeah.
Yep.
We gotta have a little fun with Clone Wars. They did a lot of Clone Wars action figures, and not too much blinking you missed him, but we have Serapis here. He was actually a bounty hunter. Actually looks kind of cool. And if you watch the show, well, there's something special about him. That's actually a robotic suit. There's a little tiny guy inside, and so you get
I kind of think they watched Independence Day before they made this one.
Independence Day or Men in Black is what I was thinking, yeah.
All right, we got Chewie. And, of course, they've made tons of Chewbacca action figures. So let's get creative, folks. Let's go ahead and bring in the Boz. Oh, yeah. And let's go ahead and create Snowba. Chewbacca as the bounty hunter Snowba. Now, this is based on the Show's the Empire comic, or novel comic, multimedia campaign that they released in 1990, mid-1990s. But yeah, this is supposed to take place like mere weeks before Empire Strikes Back. So, or Return of the Jedi, sorry, thank you. After Empire Strikes Back, before Return of the Jedi. So, Chewie must have used some serious Miracle Grow on that mane because, yeah, I don't know how he buzzes and then is normal for Jedi.
Honestly, we could have filled this entire panel with characters from the Cantina and Jabba's Palace, as they've done a lot of characters that you barely see. I don't know, some of them is like, you could blink and you missed them. This one in particular kind of appears in the film, and yet people do consider him to be a more of an EU type character, in that he was supposed to be in Jabba's Palace. I think it was kind of a mix-up with another character that was released later on, but he's kind of interesting. I don't know how many of you would be pawing through a bin of action figures and think this is a Star Wars figure. But yeah, he was supposed to be in Jabba's Palace, and they gave us an action figure of it in 2008.
Okay, so what do? We take an evil astromech droid from the Empire here. We're getting, this is a fairly recent droid we're going to show. So that means we've been working on 40 years of figures. So, we're going to start stretching a little bit.
He is orange and black.
So we're going to go ahead and think about Halloween. And then we're going to create R2 Boo. R2 Boo, the Halloween-themed astromech droid. This was actually released just last Halloween. Imagine that. Disney has got on board with making 3 3/4 Star Wars action figures exclusive to their parks. So if you've been to the parks in the last, they started in 2012, so the last 4 or 5 years, you'll see that there's different bins that you can put together droids. They're called Builder Droids at Disney. And this would be one of them. So this is an exclusive that came out last Halloween. R2 Boo.
I said we'd get back to the 1995 line. We all liked Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. She was beautiful, great, but I don't know. You know, they added muscles to the figures. I don't know what they did to poor Carrie Fisher's face. Because this got nicknamed as Monkey Leia back in 1995. You can see why. Unfortunately, there seems to be an issue with this. We've had 12-inch that cannot quite capture the likeness of Carrie Fisher, as well as recently there was an issue with the 6-inch figure, which when we debuted at Celebration Europe this last year, the first day, I remember I posted a picture and people were like, what is wrong with that face? Why did they do that? The next day they had it pulled. And the one that we did get was changed, and now they've changed it again in the upcoming 40th anniversary line. But I don't know what it is about not getting Carrie Fisher's face right, but this is not right.
We all love Revenge of the Sith. Well,
not everybody. Tom's not here, but yeah.
It featured characters and buffed up personas that were, of course,
Anakin Skywalker. So what? I mean, they made every version of Anakin Skywalker. We have him gone dark as Darth Vader. We have him as a fairly innocent boy in The Phantom Menace. We have him as a petulant teen in Attack of the Clones.
We even have a magnetic jumping figure of him.
Yeah, we have tons of Anakin Skywalker. So I'm thinking the Hasbro designers are at home thinking, man, this steak tastes good. I need to make a new figure. So why don't we just make charbroiled, cut up Anakin Skywalker? Yeah. All the kids at home are craving to rip the limbs off of a burnt to crisp Anakin Skywalker. Hottest figure of 2005, yeah? Oh man, I'm falling and I cannot get up.
Yeah, you can add limbs to it. That's great. So, if you were around in the 90s collecting figures, all of a sudden Hasbro releases this thing. And people said, what the heck is this? Literally, it came out and this is not in the movies, it's not in the EU, it's nowhere to be found. And I included this here, but it's not even really an action figure. It's part of an action figure. You kind of see a little head popping up there. He's like a little TIE pilot, but he's white. Here you see kind of his torso. This is about all you get. There's no legs on this figure. It's attached to the vehicle, has wings that spread out, all this fun stuff, and we can see, like, here's his head just popping up. I really wonder, is this like suicidal Imperial troops or something? They lost their legs, they put him on this cruise missile and send him off after the Rebel Alliance, and yeah, I don't know. Because I can't see that he's going to live if this is a cruise missile, right?
All right. So, if you were following the campaign leading up to the insanely successful Force Awakens movie from, it's weird to say 2 years ago. Right. So you may have come across this image. This is Constable Zuvio. And they pumped him on the cover of magazines, and his images were thrown on websites, official press releases, things like that. So we're expecting, dude, I cannot wait to see the amazing work that Constable Zuvio is going to do.
People thought he was going to be Boba Fett. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here you have Finn and Rey running through Jakku here, trying to escape the Imperials. Isn't it amazing the work that Zuvio did in this scene?
Well, hey, we even got Starco Plank there. Yeah.
There's Zuvio! Yep. And this is the cleanest resolution you could possibly capture from this figure because it is a blink and you literally do miss him. And so, of course, we need to make not only a 3 3/4 figure, but they even made a 6-inch figure of this. You could buy this figure in Micro Machine form, and it's just like they really embraced this character who got literally a quarter of a second. Constable Zuvio.
But no General Leia.
Yeah, we're
Or
still...
Luke Skywalker.
Ooh. Touchy subject.
Let's talk a little Captain Rex. I know a lot of people like Clone Wars. And I remember when Clone Wars was announced, I said, oh, there's going to be Captain Rex here. Well, we already have Captain Rex. Anybody that knows their Star Tours history knows this is Captain Rex, right?
Played by Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah. And for quite a while, Star Tours did, and Hasbro combined to do Star Tours action figures based on the Star Tours ride. There's even stuff based off those, like, they look like birds. Like they were animatronic birds that they just took the skins and feathers off of. They made action figures of those too. But we'll just talk about Captain Rex because you actually get an action figure of him that they later repainted. Now the cool thing about this figure is when they released the Starspeeder 1000 playset vehicle, is you could take the chair that 3PO sits in it and take that out, and you could, it actually had a spot to plug Rex into it. So you could go to that Starspeeder 3000 idea. But if you really want the stuff, there's quite a few Star Tours action figures based on the ride.
All right, shirtless Anakin. Who wouldn't want a figure of this? Well, how about this? Let's take it to another level. Let's think about tattoos, and let's think about leeches. Yep. In the Genndy Tartakovsky series, which was an animated series of the Clone Wars, it was short little snippets. This was out in 2003,
I think
four.
This
Yep.
episode was 2004.
Okay. They went ahead and made a, in that, he had these leeches that crawled over his body, gave him tattoos before he went on this spiritual journey to save a village. So, yeah, why not? Let's make a figure. And the sad thing is, this is not even the only figure they've made of this. They've made multiple versions of this shirtless, leech-sucked Anakin Skywalker.
Why not?
Why not? The girls are like, how can I get that one?
So, and like I said, we could talk about Cantina characters in Jabba's Palace all day. The other thing we can talk about is the comic packs. They gave us a lot of EU characters. And it came at a time when I wasn't reading a whole lot of the EU anymore. And so they released this stuff and be an action figure. I'm like, who the heck is that? Like, this guy. You know, clearly, you know who that is, right? Yeah. It's from the comic series. He's a Grand Moff. He kind of looks like the prototype for Darth Vader, I guess. Because we did get an action figure of him. Wouldn't you like to see him talking to Grand Moff Tarkin on the Death Star then?
All right, so Monster Droid. Everybody wants a Monster Droid, of course. Back in 1979, they're thinking of ways to be more creative with the license. So they go, okay, we got all these droids in the universe, and of course in '79, not all of these are out at that time. But another concept that was pretty popular, especially in Japan, were combining robot toys. So why don't we, and this is a predecessor, okay, 79 is before Transformers took off here in the States, and so we haven't had things like that yet. So Canada kind of tried their own version, and they referred to it as the Monster Droid. And yep, you can get this monstrosity. Monster is very key. And the amazing thing about this, I believe when this picture was taken, this thing held together for about 4 seconds before everything fell apart. So this is not a well thought out monster, but this is something that definitely occurred in 1979.
This was a part of the Droid Factory in 1979. And the idea was that you could build different droids with it, and apparently in the concept of all the droids you could build, you could combine all the pieces for the Droid Factory, for the Monster Droid. Who wants an action figure of this guy? He's an old guy that stands around with other old guys next to Darth Vader. Hey, he's cool.
Also an old guy.
Let's not only make it an action figure and an old guy, but let's make it so his hands can't actually hold anything. When you look at his hands, they're just like this. You can't hold anything there. It must be the most exciting action figure ever. So not only should we make it in 1984 with Power of the Force line, but hey, Hasbro said, let's make more in 2003. Obviously not the same character, but they had several Imperial dignitaries. So we get this guy. Oh wait, let's do more. How about this guy too? That's 3 Imperial dignitaries. Why? Were people like setting up their Death Star dioramas going, I need more Imperial dignitaries?
All right, so we got this guy here. This guy gets a few scenes in the cantina here. He's seen just kind of casually observing the crowds, smoking his pipe, I take it. Maybe he's a vapor, I don't know. But you have then, I don't know, maybe... this one speaks for itself, man. I don't know. I don't have anything to say. But this is the character, Danik Jericho. And in the expanded universe, apparently he has these phalanges that come out of his nose and suck and eat people's brains. Looks like big snot rockets to me. So, yeah, but this is a figure that you can buy on store shelves in the year 2004. Gross.
Ben Quadinaros.
Ben Quadinaros.
And anybody remember this guy? More people, I would expect more people. Phantom Menace, right? He's the guy, his pod racer starts and then it doesn't work, right? And he sits there and bangs on his pod racers, it won't go. He's basically a giant head with arms and legs. And, you know, they released pod racer characters, and the collector's like, well, when are they going to make Ben Quadinaros? Well, in 2012, on the vintage line, Hasbro said, here you go. So, yeah, because you always wanted a giant head with arms and legs.
All right, so we got, you know, Hasbro, again, like we said, we're going on a lot of years, a lot of figures. There is our good buddy Matt Fox. He does a podcast this week in Star Wars. He also creates a database kind of numbering the figures as they're released each year. And last count, 3,700 is where we're at. I think 3,700 different Star Wars action figures have been released since 1978. Boba Fett, of course, has been numerous in there. But how about this guy? Now, this is real inside stuff here. This is Daryl DePriest. He used to be the designer of the director of the Star Wars line back in 2000s. So they made Dread Priest. This is actually based on this guy here, and you can see he got his own figure. I probably put this up here mostly for jealousy because I'm not a Star Wars action figure, but he is.
There's actually been multiple figures, whether it be like Rebel soldiers or anything like that, or something where you remove a helmet, that they would sculpt in the likeness of somebody at Hasbro or whatever, something like that. So it happens more often than you think. Doesn't this guy have an awesome name? Did you know he actually appeared in a Star Wars movie that came out in 2008? Do you remember that one? In Clone Wars, where we got this guy, Worm Loathsome, because that's an awesome name. Well, yeah, we have to have an action figure of him. He was like the commander, what was that, Christophsis. He was the Separatist commander of Christophsis. And you kind of knew they had to make a figure. He was kind of featured in the Clone Wars movie. So they had to get around to him eventually.
All right, Oppo Rancis. So we got this Jedi Knight that kind of sits in the corner here, Jedi Master, because he's on the Jedi Council. He's in first, nope, Phantom Menace and Attack, or is he gone by? No, he's in Attack. He's in Attack. So he's just kind of sitting in the corner for the most part. But maybe someone at Lucasfilm, because they did the design on him, was a G.I. Joe fan. And if you remember the G.I. Joe movie, had this old guy here. It's kind of Medusa-y, inspired from Clash of Titans. His name was Globulus. Well, let's go ahead and make Oppo Rancis not have legs, but have a serpent body. So, interesting figure.
Now, it did actually come with a chair that he could wrap this all around, so it kind of normal. Han Solo. You remember that scene where he wore an ATST driver disguise? Yeah, you remember that? This was the scene right here. Okay. You know, he tells him to open the shield door bunkers. So it tells Chewie, wait, I got an idea, right? Well, I remember in the 90s, like, I customized action figure and I was like, what's something that Hasbro is never going to, they're never going to make a Han and ATST driver disguise. So I'm going to make my own out of that. I was wrong. Han Solo and ATST driver disguise. In fact, when they made this, I said, that's it. I'm not doing customs anymore because if I make something, they're going to make it. I don't see any point in doing this anymore.
I think for that scene, he just put on a helmet and a glove, too. He didn't even get him in a uniform. All right, so Teak. Teak has had a interesting path to being an action figure.
Does anybody know who Teak is?
You guys recognize this guy? Okay, well, I got a few Ewok builders in the room that raised their hand, but other than that, Teek is the star of the second made-for-television Ewok film. Okay, it is, yes, back in mid-80s. You can watch the Caravan of Courage, or the following year, the Battle for Endor. And Teek is here, and he's the warm, cuddly companion to Wilford Brimley. Okay, so. Yeah, he's the one that runs around really quick. If you've ever put yourself through this experience of watching the Ewok films, but even though he starred in this film, they never made a figure off him. And it wasn't until Star Tours came out in the Disney parks, and what they did is they had a pre-flight preload video telling you where to store your, Mickey Mouse ears and your other things you bought at the park underneath your seat. And Teek, among other Star Wars characters, was used in that scene, in that little pre-flight video. Therefore, that resulted in him being released as an action figure only through Disney. So this is a Star Tours version of Teek from the Battle of Endor.
I actually did a whole line of figures from that briefing thing. Like, if you remember in that sequence, like you have the kid taking the picture of like Chewbacca or a Wookiee and a Mon Cal. Looks like the Mon Cal is about to backhand the kid, backside the head. But they also did a reuse. You guys remember reuse? He actually came with a 3-eyed camera to go with that. You guys remember these two people from Star Wars: A New Hope? They ended up on the cutting room floor, actually. This is Cammy and Fixer, who's, they were Luke's best friends. Well, not quite best friends. I like to make fun of him. They actually had the nickname of Wormy for Luke. And why not? Let's have Cammy and Fixer as action figures. So in 2010, at Star Wars Celebration, they were made as an exclusive 2-pack. So we do get Mr. Fixer here with his awesome leather jacket, and we get Cammy with
a dog?
This was never in the movie. I don't know what that dog is. But in fact, I think I was looking at Chris's description on Jedi Business, and he called it a dog. So, I don't know. All right.
Is this yours?
Yeah, it's mine. So, Kiddick Keed Kak. This is one of those figures that when it came out, I'm like, what? This can't be a figure. This is not a Star Wars figure. It was actually released as part of the Cantina diorama pieces. They have all pieces of the bar, and they become different figures. And this is his spot in the movie. He's basically standing next to the pilot that Obi-Wan's initially talking to when they enter the cantina. And so Hasbro made a giant praying mantis action figure. Not once, but twice. They actually re-released this in slightly different colors later on. Every once in a while, Hasbro releases figures like this. No, this was not in the movie, and sure enough, yeah, there it was.
All right, well, that was actually action figure number 40. So again, I want to give a big thanks to our buddy Jedi Business for the use of the images, and you can find Chris and myself weekly on the Toy Run Star Wars Action Figure Podcast, where we break down the news, have interviews, discussions all about Star Wars action figures. So what I want to say now is, I think that mic's working up there. If not, you can come up close. We have a few minutes if you want to ask any type of question you might have. Feel free.
Do you have any particular favorite bootlegs?
Ooh, bootlegs.
Yes, I do. I have two. The first one is a 1996 Lando Calrissian, but he's white. It's a white Lando. The other one is, I actually picked it up in England last year. It is a bootleg of the Darth Sidious from Revenge of the Sith, the 5 points of articulation one. But the face sculpt isn't quite right. He just looks like he has this giant grin on his face. He looks like a happy old man, really, in robes. Those are my favorite bootlegs. Do you have any?
Favorite bootlegs? Well, I do have a 12-inch action figure. It's a SWAT member. It's a SWAT team guy I picked up at a dollar store with Boba Fett's helmet on. So it's branded as a SWAT member. So it's got some updated futuristic gear, apparently.
Any other questions? Right back here.
So of the 40 figures that you showed, how many do you guys own?
All of them.
All of them.
I think we talked about this just recently on an episode of our podcast. I think that I am missing probably 25 figures from the 3,700 that are out, I think. So
I'm missing about 3.
there you
I
go.
don't think my wife believes me, but yeah.
Yeah.
What are they?
There was an ARC Troopers pack that came out in the Clone Wars set that I saw once and like, oh, it's a battle pack. I'll see plenty of these. Yeah, I never saw it again. And there was 4 ARC Troopers in it. I have 3 of them, but there's still one I'm looking for. I think it's the blue ARC Trooper, if I remember correctly from that. I still don't have a vintage yak face. I was going to buy it a few years ago, and that deal fell through, and now they are way too expensive, it seems.
Yak Face was not released in the United States. It was only released overseas. Some made it to Canada, some made it to Australia. So it was not something that us kid collectors here, or kid, parents could pick up for us here in the States. So that's why it's a little more rare.
And then there was a series of figures that were put on the green Yoda cards a few years back that had different features and everything that were not released in the United States. I have almost all of them. I got them either Canada or somebody picked them up. There was a Boba Fett in that was a little different that I never got. Yeah, that's it.
Back here?
Are there any characters that you want to see as action figures?
Yes, and I think we moaned about it in the middle of the presentation. There's still not a Jedi Master Luke Skywalker from the end scene of The Force Awakens. So that is my number one. I know it's a new figure, but going back to the vintage stuff, I would love to have them make the figures that they were going to plan to make in '85, but then scrapped. But I don't think that would be something they're interested in producing at this point, but that would be kind of a dream for me.
And the Droids and Ewoks figures from '85, the second and third waves. If you've ever seen Admiral Screed from the Droids wave, that's a cool looking action figure. And he's actually shown up in the novels. The last Tarkin novel actually had Admiral Screed in it. So I kind of, fingers crossed, maybe that'll happen some point. But
it's a good point, because when Disney bought Star Wars, and of course rebooted, the interest in it, because by the time they bought Star Wars, George wanted to retire. They bought it for $4.2 billion. We thought Star Wars was kind of drifted away before that, but then Disney shot all this life into it, announced the new movies and the spin-off movies, and made the cartoon Star Wars Rebels. So it's all, Star Wars is back, clearly. But at that point, they were starting to die down. And so what they did is, because they wanted to start fresh, they said everything that wasn't in a movie is no longer what they call canon. It's no longer part of the Star Wars universe. It's just a made-up story. Going forward from the time Disney bought Star Wars, everything is now a new canon. So they kind of reset the sandbox, and what they've been doing is they've been tapping different pieces of that old Star Wars universe and bringing it into the new. Like Admiral Screed. He's from the Droids cartoon from '86. That's not a part of the Star Wars universe anymore, but now they could take his character and put him in a new novel, and now he is.
Or like Grand Admiral Thrawn, most recently in the
Grand
Rebels
Admiral
series,
Thrawn.
yeah.
Timothy Zahn's here, and he created a character that I honestly credit his novel, Heir to the Empire, which brought so much new attention to Star Wars in the early '90s, into bringing the renaissance of Star Wars back. And that character was part of that old universe. That got swept away when Disney bought it. But now, coming out in April, is his new novel based on Thrawn in the new universe. So, what was old is new again. Kind of.
I would say ultimately there's no specific action figure that I'm like, yeah, I really wish they'd make that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff from late in Clone Wars that they never got around to. There's a lot of stuff from Rebels. We've never had a Lando from Rebels. But ultimately, I look at vehicles like, I want Jabba Sail Barge, honestly. I think that would be an awesome vehicle, be a great play set. Jabba Sail Barge or a giant Death Star play set. Those two things. There's several vehicles from Force Awakens that we never got. The Landers, those would be cool to have. Actually, a vac metalized Captain Phasma would be awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
So
they're not doing that anymore.
So when you were a kid, you grew up like us, the C-3POs were really shiny. And that's a process called back metallizing. And that's something that's been discontinued by Hasbro, the current company that owns Star Wars, a few years back. And they, you know, I don't know why, but or I don't know what the runoff is. But they said environmental issues say that we can't produce figures like that anymore. But it's interesting because a lot of other companies do. So I don't know what the other companies are doing, or they may be paying the fine, or maybe Hasbro doesn't want to pay for cleanup. I do not know, but we don't get shiny figures anymore like we did when we were younger, or even 5 years ago. There's another question over here. Yeah.
Regarding Constable Zuvio, have you seen the hypothetical Star Wars holiday special? It features quite a bit of Constable Zuvio.
I think I
Hypothetical.
saw something of that. I don't know if I saw the whole thing.
Funny or Die did it, but
Funny or Die, okay, so.
It's got to be good then. I love them. Awesome. Here.
What's your favorite Star Wars action figure?
Easy for me. It's Luke Bespin from 1980. He's in his tan outfit. He, you know, he could almost be on this list because for some reason, when Luke Skywalker came out in '78, they gave him a yellow lightsaber. Well, by the time Empire Strikes Back came back, well, we all know, you thought the toy designers should have known that, yeah, it was blue in the last film, and it's blue in this film. They continued to give him a yellow lightsaber. So Luke Bespin, released in 1980, comes with a yellow lightsaber, but that is my all-time favorite Star Wars action figures. Just lots of nostalgia.
I'm a big Darth Vader fan.
Oh, no, hold on. Let's quantify this. Okay, and there might be one person more in the world that has more Darth Vader than Ryan. Okay, so Bill McBride's the Guinness Book World Record certified friend of ours, but Ryan's on his heels. He has got a massive collection. So, yes.
I like Darth Vader, yeah. But, you know, they made a lot of Vader figures over the years. And they had, when they got the articulation, I was like, oh, this is cool. But honestly, the helmet, every time you looked at the helmet, it was never quite right until a couple years ago. They did on the Black Series, 3 3/4 inch Vaders, they did a Revenge of the Sith Darth Vader. That helmet is amazing. And the articulation that came with it went really well. I think they used that helmet in one more figure after that. I still look at that as like, that's my favorite figure. I could go look through it, it's like, there's a lot of really cool figures, but because I'm a Vader fan, I have to go with that one. We have one more question here.
I was going to ask, so how did you go from kids asking for action figures at Christmas to, I'm going to collect all the things? Like, at what point did it shift in your head that it's something you were going to seek out and hold on to?
It's a great question. So, like most of us, Star Wars slipped from our consciousnesses. Consciousnize? Not a word. It slipped from our minds after Return of the Jedi came out. Jedi was hit with a huge campaign, was massively popular, but then quickly it went by the wayside. And I know for myself, I got into He-Man, I got into G.I. Joe, Transformers, GoBots, Starcom, Sky Commanders, Centurions, just about any 80s toy line you could possibly think about. My mother spoiled the heck out of me, both my parents did. So I was fortunate in that case, but I remember I still would go to toy shows or anywhere we'd go, I'd find figures. Dad took us to the Pal Fair that had a toy show, go there, and I was like, well, I don't have that figure, and he picked it up. So a little bit here and there, as much as a kid can be a collector in the 80s, right? Before internet, before collective knowledge is easy to grab, right? But it, probably like you, it probably came in 1995 when the toy company that still is producing them today, Hasbro, created those He-Man-like figures. It was like, oh my gosh, we're back again, and I have been all in since 1985. Haven't missed a beat.
As for me, I had the figures as a kid, of course. And you know, on the backs of the cards, it said collect all 77, collect all 92. Well, I wanted to. My parents didn't so much. And so I didn't get them all as a kid, and that was fine. But I kept it all. I just had this idea. One day I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to save all my toys and give them to that. No. Not happening. So I just saved them. And in the early 90s, when the Thrawn novels came out, of course, I was like, oh, Star Wars. Yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan. And actually, for me, it wasn't even that. It was the Super Nintendo Super Star Wars game that came out. That really excited me about Star Wars again. And I got it on VHS, and I got all that. But, he talked about 95. I go a little bit earlier, and I started with Micro Machines started hitting.
Oh, I was doing my.
And I'm like, these are cool. And I had to go up. I bought the play sets. I bought the the little figures. And one of those things that I'm sadly known for, if you listen to the podcast, the next thing that came out was Bendums. And if you don't know what Bendum is,
he had to make a reference.
Think about his Gumby Star Wars figures.
Ugly.
They're terrible. And then there was Star Wars Action Masters that came from Kenner. That was the first Kenner Star Wars figures we had since 1985. And then, of course, the 95 line. I was in college, 94, 95 was my first year in college. And I had worked a seasonal job at Toys R Us in 94. And I'd really gotten strong into Star Trek The Next Generation. And I started buying the figures. My was like, well, I'll have one of each of the main cast. Well, no, I'll keep buying. Pretty soon I had the whole set. And
me too.
Yeah, those are cool figures.
They're great.
And I'd heard Star Wars figures are coming back at 95, and I said, I want to be there for this. So I went back to Toys R Us right toward the summer of 95, and I said, I'd like to get a job. And they hired me, right back. They hired me right back. Apparently I did a good job. And I went to work there, and honestly, the Linwood Toys R Us where I worked, at the time we were one of the largest stores on the West Coast. And the distribution center for Toys R Us was in Kent, and of course things were shipped through the Seattle port. And we were one of the first stores to get the Power of the Force 2 action figures in 1995, August of 95 in fact. And we got those in, we got our first 2 cases, and I bought mine, I was there to get them, and posted online on the old forums, and I said, hey, I have these figures. People were like, no you don't. Yeah, I do. This was not a time when you had a digital camera, or if you could take a picture and load it, that you're going to see it immediately. You'd wait 8 hours to see that picture.
Horror.
Yes. Dial-up modems, weren't those fun? So I got the figures, and I didn't expect it to keep lasting, but it did, and I kept collecting. And at the time, in 95, I bought everything. Party supplies, whatever. It's like, I want it all. I want all the Star Wars. I can't do that anymore. And my wife thanks me that I can't do that anymore. And but it was exciting. So I'm always stuck with the Hasbro action figures, and I continue to buy those. When I say 13,000 action figures, I'm not joking. I've built several giant dioramas where you need 100 stormtroopers in it and things like that. So I was fortunate enough that I worked at Toys R Us for 8 years, so I would have crack at a lot of things, and especially living with Toys R Us, we got stuff early and first in a lot of cases, and we got lots of it. But the best part was, as a collector, in 2000, they started liquidating a lot of stuff, and they'd ship us FX X-Wings, $10 a piece. I called the store, I said, save me 6 cases. $10 for a giant X-Wing is a really good price, so I have 20. 15 A-Wings. But when you can get those prices on that, it builds on that. It makes you want to build up giant dioramas on that. So it's just, I don't know, that leap from childhood, I didn't go through all the lines like he did. I did Star Wars, then I was G.I. Joe, then Transformers, then Lego. Then it was baseball cards, which I know a lot of people who get into collecting. Baseball cards is like a gateway drug to collecting, because you have these sets where, I did Mariners team sets, that was my thing. But I think I always bridged the gap on that collecting to when it finally got to Star Wars.
We got, I think, one more question right here.
Well, as an adult at least, I always felt like toys were for playing with. And I can see how, today if someone lucked into one of these really rare and obscure things, that they would keep it in the box. It's a very different world from when the movie came out, and everyone's buying these things to play with them. But did you have anything meaningful to say about that whole, rip, what's that, versus no, this will pay for my kid's college education one day, kind of dichotomy that goes on in the mind?
Sure. When the figures came back in 95, people got that in their head that they were going to retire or put their kids through college on they came back on orange-colored cards, orange and green, and people would track down every variant because you know, there was only 92-ish figures done in the original line, and there were some variants that were rare, and people were thinking in that same mentality, but they weren't thinking that a new company is producing them, and everyone's thinking like that. The reason the figures from our vintage days, 70s and 80s, are worth so much is because we didn't save them on card. We didn't keep them and put them aside. We were kids, we were fans, we ripped them off the card and played with them. That's what they were for. There's a different mentality. That you mentioned the baseball cards. That bubble popped in the 90s as well. So did comic books, and with shiny covers and inserts and all sorts of things. So the collecting bubble popped in the 90s. And so, and it's been popped essentially when people are thinking about buying toys to invest in. That is not something you should ever do now. We always say, buy what you love, buy what you like, because that's going to give you more benefit over time than you trying to pay for, you know, little Jimmy's college with your Jar Jar Binks action figure.
I still rip the figures off the cards, so
As do I.
I like my stuff loose. Yeah. No. But as far as like collecting, how do you predict what's going to be worth a lot of money? It's hard. Who would know that right now, like the 2008 to about 2012 action figures for the modern line are some of the most expensive figures to find on the secondary market? Because it was a lot of Clone Wars, there was a lot of stuff out there, and people were leaving the hobby a little bit more at that time, but there was a lot of cool stuff, and especially now that we have a lot of 5-point articulation, people are going back and wanting the multiple articulation on this stuff. And so like was Ahsoka on vintage card was Ahsoka, who people hated in 2008.
Anakin's little Jedi Padawan that they put in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
She's just, you know, she started off as a really annoying character, but became very, very popular.
That figure, that vintage carded figure from, was that 2012?
Like 160.
I thought it was more than that now, but
Probably.
it's crazy. Some of that stuff's like
$10 figure a couple years later is 160. Whereas there's thousands of $10 figures that are worth $2 now. So there is no, you know, it is just like the stock market. It is just like the stock market. You'll win on some, you're going to lose on most.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Anybody has any more?
What's the most expensive one you've ever purchased?
What?
My wife's going to hear this podcast. So we buy most of it when it comes out, because like Ryan, I too in the 90s wanted to go to the source, and I got a job at Toys R Us too. What's that?
Imagine that.
I know. Imagine that. We're both school teachers, we both work at Toys R Us, we both collect toys, you know, it's weird. I think last year at this very show, I think I bought my most expensive figure. I try not to. I play the long game. Obviously, we have a massive amount of figures, and we've been doing this a long time. I'm not going to rush to pay that type of money, but I have, last year I paid $140 for an EV-99, which is a really brittle, frail figure from the last line that Kenner did in 1985.
I've never spent over $100 on a 3 3/4 inch action figure. I don't want to. I think the most expensive figures I ever bought were the 2-pack of Exar Kun and Ulic Keldroma, which was a hard to get comic 2-pack. Honestly, I paid like about $80 for that. And yes, I did open them. But probably the most expensive collectible I have, not just action figure, is not Star Wars. I bought the Hot Toys DeLorean. 1/6 scale DeLorean, because I'm a Back to the Future fan as well. That was about $700, I think, when I got it. It's awesome, though. It lights up. I saw it at Comic-Con, and I had to have it. But before I knew you. So that's probably the most expensive thing I ever purchased. I know people who purchased a lot more expensive stuff than that.
Why the second Snaggletooth had big hobbit feet?
Was it part of the costume?
I think it was part of the costume. I think he was wearing boots in the costume.
I think it was because they saw what Lucasfilm, the creators, wanted to make for that figure, and they eventually got better photo and better reference material for it, so they changed it up.
Do either of you have the ceramic C3PO tape dispenser?
How many people know what the ceramic C-3PO tape dispenser is? It was from Sigma Ceramics. It literally has C-3PO reclining and holding a spool of tape in between his legs. So you're pulling the tape out in between his legs.
Yep.
I guess that goes around with the Topps card there that they did. But I don't have it. Do you happen to have it?
I do not. I do not.
I have friends who have it, but I don't have a whole lot of the Sigma stuff, so it's never something I've got. Krister, do you have that?
Yeah, I got that for Christmas, actually.
Okay. Krister's a big C-3PO fan, so.
StarGeek on YouTube.
Yeah.
Check him out. He's awesome. Another question?
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate that you were able to make the change from over here.
Anybody going to Celebration next month? I'll be there. Ryan can't make this one, but I'll be here and I'll be there doing other panels and having a booth too. So come say hi there. Thank you.
I know. That's the king There you go. Start it up.